Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Knights of the Alternate Histories, and in today's video, we're going to be going over what if World War I ended in a stalemate part 3, so if you haven't seen the others, please watch them, and I know I might have been gone for a while, but don't worry, you have to wait till Thursday to find out, because that's going to be in the Wacky Ideologies video. So, yeah, let's get into the video. Please subscribe, and join the Discord. So anyways, we left off with this map, with the Soviet Union barely invading, but the Germans starting to push them back. But the French, well, they would get an upper hand, and the betrayal of Bulgaria would leave Germany scarred. Their forces in Italy cut off, but overall, still in a pretty good position if they want to hold on and fight. So, Britain barely joined the war and is preparing an invasion. France wouldn't have time to prepare for an invasion, so the tip of Normandy would start getting invaded, and British troops would start arriving through the Netherlands into the German-occupied zone. The Russians would slowly push them back, but the Ottomans would start to make progress throughout the Balkans, trying to take down Bulgaria real quick. Meanwhile, in Italy, the states would keep on getting smaller and smaller, with German armies preparing to avoid. Meanwhile, Corsica and Sardinia would be an absolute stalemate. This would be the worst fighting, as the Corsicans and the Sardinians would absolutely try and destroy each other. They would barely be able to get the upper hand on each other, which is why this would be so loud. Meanwhile, the Ottomans would start an island-hopping campaign throughout Greece, starting with an invasion of Crete. Meanwhile, as the Bulgarians would push out more and more, but the Ottomans would start pushing into the heart of Bulgaria, which would be a pretty bad sign for them, but the Russians would keep on making their way through. But as the Russians would make progress, the German army would slowly start to destroy France. Paris would make a last stand, but once again, it would be almost completely destroyed and wouldn't have a chance at survival. As well, Italy would start to regain its states, with the socialists of Milan thinking they have a pretty good chance at reforming Italy. Also, the Ottomans would complete their invasion of Crete and would start to invade Sparta. But as Italy fell, the Soviet Union would drop out, knowing that as soon as France fell, the German force would be on top of them, as well as the British force. They would have no chance. And so the Soviet Union would just say, okay, we surrender DMZ zone, and the Germans would be happy to agree with this, as they would still be gaining territory. Also, Greece would start to take down more and more. Corsica and Sardinia would also see heavy fighting, but the thing to remember is, as the Germans start to take over more and more of France, they would also be losing lots of casualties, as well as the Bulgarians. The Ottomans would start moving in and start crushing Bulgaria from the inside, and the chain of command would kind of collapse. The Bulgarians would have to do something to retake their capital and most of their core territory, but they would still be pushing up through and almost taking out. But since the Bulgarians were managed to push through, this would mean they would start losing territory in the Upper Balkans, but at least they wouldn't completely collapse from the Ottomans, who would rain devastation on the cities, but at least they would be safe. Meanwhile, the Italians would manage to conquer their entire peninsula and would start to look out. And Corsica would start to fall as well. This would be really good for the Italians, who would now be kind of the best player, as they would have the most course and strongest states. Now, Bulgaria worrying about that if they completely collapse, or if France collapses, there would be no solid, strong state to be able to support this alliance. They would start unifying their puppets. They would allow Italy to take over its own puppet states in the Italian peninsula, as well as the land they've already conquered. As well, they would let Greece completely form, and would basically allow them to be them, trying to create a core state. As well, they would also let the Hungarian Empire form soon after, but France would now be able to start holding its line and trying to keep on its own, as the German and British troops would start to rack up in casualties. This would allow the Hungarians to try and push up and take out more of Croatia, with, once again, the German army getting spread thin, but their forces soon would also start getting spread thin as well, but the core states would really help to manage it. But as I keep on mentioning, both sides would start gaining rapid casualties, basically wiping out their entire forces. They would start having to scrape the bottom of the barrel, and even then, they would still be chucking troops at each other, just leaving them. This would be much more deadlier than World War I, and would last about twice as long as World War II, even going into the 50s. But they would still be able to hold the line and try and fight each other. But Germany was having to start rumored troops, and Britain, who had far less population than France, would be in charge of the Western Front, while Germany would start taking control in the Balkans. The siege of Istanbul begins. It would start to leave it being completely destroyed and almost ruined, while the Germans try and push to help it. But as the troops start to number out, the Americans would absolutely be making bank, as they wouldn't have to fight the Japanese due to no World War I. The Japanese wouldn't need to expand as much. This would lead to them being able to just sell weapons and supplies to both sides, and both sides would have to buy them up, as having so few troops means that they would have to go mechanized, because one man can't face two. But as one side to push, that means they would start losing casualties, which would mean the other side would have to push, and the lines would barely be able to flex. So as the Germans move in, they would start trying to focus on just destroying the enemy. They would start buying American planes to try and level cities, and overall, most of the war zones would just become leveled. Istanbul would hold out, but France would start pushing around. But while the Soviet Union dropped out early, they would avoid casualties, and this would allow them to become a third entry in the war, trying to puppet all of Europe. And by doing this, they would pose themselves as the anti-war union. Don't let the monarchs or your government tell you what to do, and rise up and take arms against the government and become communists. And this would speak to a lot of people. They would just quickly destroy everything, as the teenagers or even 9-year-olds who didn't want to get drafted would just grow up and strike, not wanting to die in the war that killed their older siblings, that killed their fathers, grandfathers, and would start seeing the communists as their only option. This would allow the Soviet Union just to kind of march in and push them, while the nations try and put down these small rebellions. With all of the casualties that they were taking, the Soviet Union could basically kick them around like a football, being able to just try and destroy them. And so the Soviet Union just took out everyone. With the communist revolution all over, this would mean they would get their own free reign and would basically be able to take them over no matter what. And because this war took so many lives and took so many casualties, the Soviets would get free reins. Any dissenters or counter-revolutionaries to the main revolution would just get executed by Soviet soldiers. The whole European population would probably drop something like 30%, because they would scrape the bottom of the barrel, 9-year-olds fighting with 99-year-olds. With the Soviet Union having the idea to unite all socialist nations, and now having complete control, as well as not having to compromise or divide with the US, and have the illusion of free will, they would just straight up annex stuff. They would leave Western Europe on its own, run by a Paris Commune, as a puppet government, so it wouldn't be completely Soviet controlled, as they would slowly oppress and make them more Russian. But this would also allow them to lead them to establish a friendly communist government to soon just annex them. And lastly, Britain and Ireland would just say, out of the war. They would quickly leave as the socialists take us over and start defending their own coasts, trying to stop them. The Soviet Union wouldn't be interested in invading them, but rather invading Iberia and then eventually them to expand their communist regime. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know I'm going to explain it in Thursday's video, but yeah, I hope you enjoy. Basically, I got swamped with homework. But yeah, make sure to like and subscribe and join the Discord because we're pretty cool down there. And yeah, I don't really have anything else to promote because, you know me, not that good at social networking. I have a different video coming up next week. But yeah, I hope you enjoy and see ya. Wow, what a good video. If you like this, then you should subscribe with the channel button in the middle, or on the left. That's my most recently uploaded video, which I think is the best video I've ever done. And on the right, well, that's a video YouTube thinks you should watch. Who do you think